What's good? It's Scoobert Dubert. So before these video podcasts, I want to introduce what my guest is so that you know what you're getting yourself into. This is Bermuda. He is the right-hand man of Weird Al Yankovic. He's been playing drums and producing and touring and doing everything with him since 1980. And I think it's a really cool thing because, it's a parody artist, but also a diamond record holder. That's not usually something that's in the same sentence. And also as a parody artist over the course of 40 years, they've done everything in popular music, like every genre, everybody from Imagine Dragons to Michael Jackson. And he's been having to decode and figure out the drums to suit that song and create this platform for Weird Al to sit on top of and play accordion. Like, how wild is that? And so this has taken him around the world, and through it all, he absolutely loves music, and that's why I loved our conversation. So I'm excited for you to hear that, and before you do, I also want to introduce you to Vinyl Moon. Vinyl Moon's our new sponsor, and one of the coolest out there. And yeah, it's this beautiful art, but the beauty is that it comes every single month, and it's totally new. So this is not just a record of the month kind of club. This is a compilation. This is like a mixtape. This is your new music discovery vehicle. And it's so much more than that because in an age of algorithms and Discover Weeklies, nothing wrong with that. But it's really easy to kind of sample music and just go 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there, add this to a playlist, never go back to that playlist. Sitting down with a vinyl that's highly curated, that's got really, really cool acts, that's just different. You really discover the music. You really absorb it. And it's not just any old vinyl. It's beautiful. And every single month is a new surprise with a new designer. It's rad. Vinylmoon.co is where you find out about them. And if you get the number 100, the centennial, the century, you will also get, let me find it, one of my songs. So that's my song, Getting Easier, is on this one. They actually found me, I had less than probably 5,000 monthly listeners when they found me, before. And a bunch of people started streaming my music because they found me on Vinyl Moon. And it was cool because it wasn't like looking at me from a numbers perspective or a fame perspective. It was just the music, just listening to the music like you would at a record store or something like that, just in the comfort of your own home. And it's cool. They give you these extra goodies, little cutouts and stuff. It's awesome. It's so rad. So definitely check them out. And they have a new promotion where your first vinyl is free with your subscription. So no risk. Try them out. Check it out, and you'll love it. You're just gonna love it. They discover really cool bands, and if you're in a band, be sure to send them your music because I'm sure you're rad because you're listening to this podcast, and they find rad stuff and send it around. So anyway, without further ado, here is my conversation with Bermuda. What's up, everybody? This is Scoobert Dubert. Welcome back to Love Music More. I am joined with Bermuda Schwartz, who is going to talk to us all about his life as a drummer, working with amazing artists, including Weird Al Yankovic. We're going to have a great conversation just talking about your life on the road, your career, and kind of your perspective as a musician, and just trying to bring the people out so they can love music a little bit more at the end of this program. So welcome, Bermuda. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, and that all sounds good. You start.
Cool, right on. I'm glad to hear it. So one of my favorite ways to start off a conversation like this is just ask, how did you get acquainted with music? Where'd you get the bug? How did it kind of take your life and say, okay, this is what I want to do?
Well, there was always music in our house as a child. My brother played guitar. My father, not a lot, but he owned an accordion and he played accordion. Yes. My mother played piano and sang, and not professionally. My brother played, would become a pro soon. But there was always music in the house. There was there were Latin orchestra albums. There were Gene Krupa albums. There were comedy albums, Alan Sherman and the like. And so it was always around me, and. My brother at some point, actually, I started taking accordion lessons before I took drum lessons.
Really? Did you?
Yeah, I had, and I was probably 8, maybe I was 9, I don't know. Okay. And that didn't last too long. I mean, I played well enough. I think I advanced to the second book of the accordion method, the Palmer Hughes accordion method. And in the meantime, my brother had he originally played drums. So there were drums in the house. He switched to guitar while we were living in Phoenix, and I inherited his drums and started taking drum lessons. And this was not immediately when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan's Show, but about a year and a half later, and after I'd been listening to the Beatles a bit and other pop radio, and still listening to Gene Krupa albums, I started taking drum lessons. And this was around September of 1965.
Cool.
And so I've been at it for a while.
Yes.
And almost coming up on 60 years next year.
Wow,
and,
amazing. That's awesome.
So it was there, and my parents encouraged me, and we lived in a house, and I practiced during the day, and I'm sure made a lot of noise, but they never told me to be quiet, and always made sure I had lessons, and we moved to Los Angeles, and a short time later, and I joined the school band, the orchestra, and was playing like orchestral stuff. I didn't really play drum set in there.
Okay.
In high school I did, however. I was in marching bands, I was in youth orchestras, and basically sort of developed that and had a chance to play with people. But as far as when I decided this was something I wanted to do, I was 12 years old, and I don't know what prompted me, but I thought being a professional drummer would be a lot of fun. Maybe I might even make some money. So I was age 12 when I decided that's what I'd really like to do. And cool. And I guess that began it. That began a life of making decisions that pointed me in that direction. And, some of them deliberate and some of them, right place, right time, stroke of luck. Yeah. And such as meeting Weird Al was completely right place at the right time. You can't create that. I didn't know he was going to be where I met him. And that's where that began. So
was that on Dr. Demento's radio show? Was that how
that was on his live show here in L.A.? Cool. And actually, at that point, I'd already been playing around L.A. a bit and doing a bunch of demos and stuff. And I had sent stuff with some school friends of mine. We were in high school. Had sent some songs into Dr. Demento to see if he would play them. And he did. Yeah, awesome. He played this homemade music. I was among the first people to ever send in homemade music and get it played. Now, they weren't original songs. They were just covers of songs that he had been playing. And at some point later on, and I can't overemphasize the role that my brother played in a lot of things. One, having a set of drums in the house when I decided I wanted to take drum lessons. But he went on to play, among recording with a ton of people, went on to play with Neil Diamond.
No way.
And played guitar with Neil Diamond and wrote some songs, for and with Neil. Spent many, many years doing that. At any rate, the keyboard player, one of the keyboard players in Neil's band, Tom Hensley, who still had been working with Neil right up to the end, right up to this last tour, was friends with Dr. Demento, and I think had produced an album that of one of the artists that Dr. Demento played, the Roto-Rooter Good Time Christmas Band or something like that. And he had invited my brother and I through Dr. Demento to go sit in on the show, to go see the show live, to go sit in the studio with him. So that was the first time. This is 1980, summer of 1980. It was the first time I actually met Dr. Demento after having sent him 3 recordings in the past. And at this point, I should add that Dr. Demento was playing a lot of homemade music. Some years later, he started to cater to a lot of home artists. That was really the only outlet they had. They couldn't get on regular radio.
No way.
So I was there, and of course, Dr. Demento remembered the songs I did. He says, "Oh, would you like to come and do an interview and talk about the stuff you sent in, 5, 6, 7 years ago now, and and what you're doing now?" I said, "Oh, that'd be great." So we set a date, September 14th, 1980, and I went down there on that day, and Weird Al was there. Now, he had already been sending in a lot of stuff to the show, and he was one of the regulars on there. There were like a series of like cast members, and they would do funny bits and take requests and stuff like that. And he was there and wanted to debut a song he had just written that weekend, which was another one, Rides the Bus, for Queen's, another one, Bites the Dust. And he asked if I would beat on his accordion case. It was very organic. It was him and the accordion, people standing around with noisemakers and stuff, and asked if I would beat on his accordion case, which I did. I knew who he was.
Yes.
I thought that was pretty cool. Totally. And Dr. Demento recorded that. Just a 2-track stereo, but he rolled tape when we did the song. So there's an official recording of that. The night I met him, the night I started recording with him, and it got released on as singles and on the first album.
Fantastic. It's incredible.
So that was the beginning of that, and legend has it, and it probably is correct. I must have said to him that night, I said, you should have a band. I'll be your drummer.
Yes.
And again, I didn't go there to meet him. It just stroke of luck, right place, right time. I said the right thing, I guess. And here I am, coming up on 43 years later.
Amazing.
And 43, it's over 43. And, a lot of albums, a lot of tours, a bunch of TV, some movie stuff. I've put out 2 photo books on Al. I always had a camera with me.
Cool.
He graciously allowed me to use a ton of photos of him.
Awesome.
And, it's been and continues and should be, God willing and barring any unforeseen circumstances, a continuing career. I mean, we have a plan for the next tour. I already have a set list.
Great.
I had it a year and a half in advance of what we're supposed to play on this next tour.
Cool.
In 2025. And, no end in sight. I mean, there's a lot of artists work well into their 70s and even 80s. And and Al's younger than all of us, so he'll probably make it longer than we all do. But I think he'll do this as long as he can, and as long as people continue to come see him. And they are. They have not, it's not slowed down a bit.
I love that. And I also love that just kind of the hope, the glimmer of hope that it can give other home recorders and other people that are trying to break into music scenes and stuff. Just seeing like, oh no, other people have done this. You have to find a broadcast partner is usually like a part of the trick, is like somebody that can help amplify the music and the message. You have to find community, like yourself and Weird Al coming together to be able to create that synergy, do stuff together. And then you also have to position yourself like you were willing to say, hey, I'll play the accordion case. I don't need a whole drum kit. I don't need my writer. I don't need my green M&Ms. Like I'm here. I'm down for the adventure, and put yourself into that place, and it turned into a career. It's wonderful.
It sure did, and for which we're all very grateful. Everyone asks him and all of us, at what point did you realize this was going to be a career? And it's hard to say, because every year or two, every new album, every new video and MTV hit video that we had, it was like the next level. It was like, well, this is good for a couple of more, 2 or 3 or 4 more years, and then we'd have another one out, and it kept going and going and going, and we don't know, when it might stop or slow down or anything. It's done neither. As far as musicians making music at home and getting it out there, I mean, thankfully there's the internet. Yeah. And with social media, assuming you have a good networking skill and can get it out there and get it out to the right people, who will share it. And that's free and on demand. And and we didn't have that. Really in the 60s or 70s or 80s, and it was a little while in the 90s before that became a reality. Now everyone can do it. Yes. And there's all sorts of channels and outlets that cater to that. And, it's just a matter of getting some eyes and ears on it. But you don't have to go through radio. I mean, I don't know that you even could anymore. Right. You can still do it through Dr. Demento. He still does his show. It's online only now. And people submit stuff to him all the time. And there's quite a bit of great comedy out there and great minds creating stuff at home, or with their bands and sending it in, and Dr. Demento plays it. And it's like, well, that's exactly how Al came up,
Amazing. I'd love to do that. That'd be a great idea. So I'd love to talk about kind of that early stage. So I know Weird Al, he was doing home recording, and then also did you bond on the accordion kind of background, or how did that kind of initial spark?
I'm sure I must have mentioned it to him at some point, but I do recall specifically we were on the road in 1984 or 5 or something like that. Yes. We were in St. Louis. We were at Six Flags over Mid-America, just outside of St. Louis. Yeah. And during sound check, I went and picked up his accordion. I probably hadn't picked up an accordion since I put it down when I was a kid. And I remembered a couple of little things, and I sort of played it. And he was I'm probably horrified that I was able to make a sound at all out of that, because I'm not, I otherwise didn't really have any melodic background. I couldn't sing, and I rarely am asked to sing for that reason, so he must have thought that I had no concept of notes or anything like that. And I sort of halfway got through one of these old songs that I knew as a kid, and he was really surprised. He was very, very surprised that had happened. And I'd mentioned that my father had played accordion, and I have his old accordion. It's a big full-size accordion, and I hadn't touched it in years and years. And a year or two ago, during COVID, I had nothing to do, so I'm sitting around the house.
Hey, cool, yeah.
And I took it out and very carefully opened it up, because the bellows are made of like calfskin or something. I mean,
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
it's organic, and so they're like sort of a little bit stuck together. But I opened it up carefully, and I picked it up and put my fingers in the right place, and I played that song again.
Yeah.
And I still
love it.
remembered only the one song, and I don't think I could hear something and duplicate it. I just remember all the finger positions on that,
Yeah.
and that was pretty cool. So I still have his accordion here, and I must have asked Al if he wanted it for some
Yeah.
reason, and he's
Right.
he's got enough accordions, so
I'm
he
sure.
doesn't.
I'm sure he's got quite the collection.
But he's certainly aware that I can pick up his accordion and make some sounds with it.
Yes, that you're just
And-
dangerous enough.
Yeah, and therefore that has never been done in concert, or And now Bermuda would like to play the accordion for you. I mean, he's
Yes.
never pulled that out because he knows what a train wreck that would be.
I love that though. There was on a tour that I did, the sound guy was the absolute worst violinist, but he would always play violin for the sound check. And even if it was in a festival where there's people are able to hear the monitors, he would go out and just rip the worst version of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and everyone in the front row is clutching their head.
Well, that way the band sounds really good.
Exactly. No, yeah, it's the best possible opener. So in terms of so you start working together. You've developed your career, you developed your chops. You're in LA. How do you kind of take it to the next level and start playing live and growing into a touring act, like kind of flipping from a regional act to a national act? Like how does that start to progress, and kind of what did you see, and what kind of lessons would you be able to pass on from that kind of?
Well, this was at a time MTV was brand new.
Okay.
Al got on a proper record label with proper distribution, with worldwide distribution.
Awesome.
And actually, we the way the first album came about, and then the record contract. First album came about. We were sort of Al and I and a couple of people. Actually, my brother came in and played on some of these very early pre-album things. He played on the first album too a little bit.
Sweet.
But
Awesome.
we were going to do a parody. We did a parody of I Love Rock and Roll called I Love Rocky Road about ice cream. So the Joan Jett song, right?
Yeah.
And in getting, Al got to a point where he would seek permission from at least one of the writers of the song, and Joan Jett didn't write the song, so he had to go to a guy named, God, I can't think of his name. It's on the credits, I know that. It was Liza Minnelli's husband.
No way.
I'm sorry, I can't think of his name. I'm sorry, but he
No worries, I'll pull it
in seeking permission, and we had made a recording of it. We had just done like a living room type recording, actually, with a bunch of his friends and me on the accordion case again.
Cool.
And in seeking permission, the guy said, "Yeah, that'd be great. I also happen to manage Rick Derringer, and let me see about getting you a proper way to record this."
Cool.
So
Yes.
that evolved into getting some spec time at Cherokee Studios, famous studio in LA.
Awesome.
And Rick Derringer came in, and we didn't really have a band. I mean, it was just me and Al. So we got a bass player,
Cool.
who then Steve, who is still with us, Steve J.
Amazing.
Who had come out from Florida.
Yeah.
And one of his bandmates at the time was a guy named Jim West, and Jim wasn't officially the guitar player yet. Steve had kind of joined the band, played on the first album with me, Al, Rick Derringer, and guitar. And then so here's this album's worth of songs that
Yes.
Al's manager is now shopping to different labels.
Cool.
And all the labels, the story goes, all the labels said, someone's going to make $1 million with you guys, just not us.
It's not us.
Anyway, finally somebody said, somebody's going to make $1 million. It's going to be us.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And that was the Scotti Brothers.
Cool.
Well, this happened literally 7, 8, 9 months after we recorded the album to begin with. So the songs that were on there, they were saying, well, we understand you're doing parody songs of kind of current songs. That's a good thing, but nothing on here is terribly current. Can we get something new, and then we'll go ahead and release the album, as is. So we came in and recorded a few more songs, and I think Jim West at that point came in and recorded with us, and that was Ricky became, and that became the single, the first single and first video.
Cool.
And then he also came in and we recorded the Buckingham Blues, which actually I think was the B-side of Ricky, as it turns out.
Okay.
I think. Anyway, that became the first video. That was May of 1983, maybe. Now, April, May. again, MTV was pretty new. It was just a couple of years old. They were still playing videos. They were all about the music videos, and not everybody had videos. So there were a lot of repeat stuff. They were very hungry for fresh content.
Yes.
They were hungry for unique content. Well, here's a guy doing a parody, playing accordion, and we didn't really parody the Mickey video, Tony Basil's Mickey video. We just, of course, we did the music. There was a reference to Tony Basil in there. We had a cheerleader come in and dance around at the end. But the whole thing was shot it was produced in black and white, like an I Love Lucy episode. And Al got the woman that sang the Ricky part, the Lucy part on the song, was Tress MacNeille. And Tress went on to do a lot of voiceovers for cartoons. She's a regular on The Simpsons.
Cool.
And she came in and got done up as Lucy for the video. She looked like Lucy Ricardo from the 50s. She really had that vibe. It was great. Al shaved off his mustache. They pulled his hair back and put a kind of a black pompadour, shiny wig on him. Took the glasses off, and he was Ricky to her Lucy. Anyway, hit video. A lot of airplay on that, and it's like, we got to make another video.
Yes,
so we took.
Right.
Now we go back to I Love Rocky Road, which is a year and a half or two, maybe old at this point. Did a video for that. A lot of airplay, and that sells albums. That sells concert tickets. Now the very first tour we went on was not really even our tour. I think it was May, maybe into June of 1983, and we went out. Dr. Demento used to go around and tour around and do a live version in front of an audience of his show. Where he could show videos, which he couldn't do on the radio, of course.
Cool. Yep.
And he played some stuff that was a little racy, that wouldn't fly on the radio. And we went out as his live musical act. And we did a little 3-week tour.
Yeah.
And it was great. We had a great time. We drove ourselves. We had a station wagon and a U-Haul. We humped all the gear. We didn't even have someone doing sound or lights. It's just whoever was in the club, we trusted them. And we couldn't play Ricky, because we didn't have the female vocal to do. Yeah. And I think we tried a couple of times where I tried to sing it and just kind of squeaked out hey Ricky, and it wasn't working. So we showed a film. We showed a 16mm film of the video.
Cool.
While we did a costume change to come out and finish with some other song. Cool. Anyway, we did that for 3 weeks. Did well. Album sold pretty well. Started to make a new one later on. Next album would have Eat It on it. And Eat It, much bigger hit than and of course Michael was huge. Well, Michael's always been huge. Yes, and got Michael's approval on that, and did the video. Used the same white gang leader, Vince Patterson, was actually Michael's and Madonna's and some other people did choreography for all of them.
Wow,
and appeared in some videos. A very well known choreographer. Yeah. And he came down and was in the video, sort of to just lend a little authenticity and that did very, very well on MTV. While that was coming out, we went on another tour with Dr. Demento in February and into March. And during that time, Eat It is going up in the charts. I think it was like number 12 on Billboard.
Oh my God!
A hit video on MTV. And in the meantime, now Dr. Demento's show with the special musical guest became Weird Al's show with kind of Demento, being the guy, and then you wait for Weird Al at the end. Yeah. We went out again a few months later in the summer, and now we're on our own. Now we have a bus and a driver. We've got a sound guy and a light guy, and that's kind of summer of '84 is when it really began to take off, and we were on our own and really doing it. Came back, worked on another album. Nice. Madonna's Like a Surgeon, Like a Virgin.
Perfect.
Again, hit video. Big hit video. 1985 tour, the album was Dare to Be Stupid, which was named after one of the songs on the album, which also had its own video. That came out. We had a tour planned. I forget if it was CBS or who it was, wanted to do a video, wanted to do like a Showtime special.
Okay.
And they actually funded some of the videos in shooting this whole thing. They paid for a couple of the videos. There was a book that came out that was sort of a companion to that, The Authorized Al, which is a very expensive book now. It's very popular among the fans. But this came out and it's called The Complete Al. And Compleat Al. And so that aired on Showtime, but also came out in video. Came out in VHS and beta at the time. Later on DVD. Later, and I think I have.
You have one?
I have one right in front of me.
Yes. Perfect.
The complete Al, and this is a DVD. Anyway, so 85 was a great year. 86, another album. We had like 4 albums in 4 years, 83, 84, 85, 86. 86, the lead single was Living with a Hernia for James Brown's Living with America. Didn't do terribly well. The album did not. It's still, a million years later, still has not gone gold. And this is over many, many years of albums actually selling. Whereas some albums went gold in a month or two.
Wow.
Many of them went platinum. That album hasn't gone gold. That was Polka Party.
Polka Party.
Not that the song wasn't well done. Not that the video wasn't funny. It's just not sure what happened. Not sure what happened. And we decided that there was sort of no point in touring on that album. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it was like, and we would have probably toured the following year, and we didn't. But in the meantime, Al is beginning to write a movie based on 3 hit albums. He and his manager co-wrote a movie and called UHF, and that was shot during 1988. A lot of it was shot on location in different locations in Tulsa, Oklahoma. But in the meantime, we're already beginning the next album, which would be called Even Worse. And we had, again, Michael Jackson. We did Take Off on Bad called Fat. And that was, not only was that really a funny song and really well done. And by the way, I should add that starting with the second album, first album was very kind of rock band based, like with an accordion lead. There wasn't a big effort to try and sound like the original song. I mean, sonically.
Right.
We played the parts, we just played them on accordion and guitar, bass, and drums.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, actually, real quick before you continue, how do you how are you approaching that? Just from kind of drum tones and kind of your take on those parts, but kind of breathing life into it in your own way and dealing with the other musicians. How are you kind of like digesting those parts and determining what you were going to be playing?
Well, on the first album, because we weren't trying to do that, because we weren't trying to copy the original song.
Yes.
I did have a certain amount of freedom.
Yeah.
I guess I did. I should add that when we did My Bologna for My Sharona, we did it in a way that we had been playing it live for a little bit already.
Oh, cool.
Which was not really what the knack was doing. It was like a complete, because here the guy's playing accordion, so why would I play the real drum part? Right.
Right.
Anyway, so we recorded that, and it sounds nothing like the knack. Now, in later years, when we would come out and we would do that in a medley, I would do the proper Bruce Gary parts, we would really sound like we started to sound, but with an accordion up front. But it really had more of a vibe.
Sorry to interrupt this very important broadcast, but it's time for one more advertisement for myself for this podcast. What I'm asking for is for you to rate it 5 stars, share it with your friends. This is like the most important thing for this podcast to grow. So if you want to do this, you go onto the podcast screen, right? You click on the ... on Spotify. Under there, it says rate show, and you go and you click it 5 stars. If you could do that for me, that's the best way for the algorithms and all this stuff to share it out with the world. I know that it's a lot to ask, but if you could please just hit those 3 dots and then a 5 star, it would really help us out and helps us, get the word out and spread the love of music. So thank you. If you're listening on YouTube, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. And here's the rest of the episode.
Well, it was Rick Derringer, I think, that suggested after that first album, as we started to record the second album, he says, we should probably really go after the sounds and the parts, the exact parts and the feel of the original, which will make it even funnier with these different lyrics against it. So when there's a musical, somebody hears your song come on the radio, they'll think it's Michael Jackson, and all of a sudden it's Al singing.
Yes.
So with the second album, we did start to pay much closer attention to parts and sounds, and parts aren't really a problem. Sounds, that doesn't all happen in the studio. I had to get different drums, different snares to use.
Yes.
I explored different cymbal sounds.
Okay.
I was very cautious about tuning.
Yes.
There were a lot of considerations in going to the studio. And also at this point, and this was late 83 and into early 84, you were starting to hear a lot of synthesized stuff on the radio, a lot of program stuff in it. And it was to get more and more prevalent over the years later. And that was still a little bit of a mystery to me. I didn't get my first drum machine. I actually got electronic. I got a Simmons kit in '84 because I knew I would need it at some point. But that's really not. That's a specific kind of a sounding thing. It wasn't until 1985 that I actually got a drum machine and started exploring programming. And and sequences. And it was probably 89 or 90 that I got my first sampler. And I already had computers at that point, and I began working on actual sound files. And over the next several years, I got into sound design, which I really learned when I would hear something, because all the songs we were copying, all those producers out there are doing some pretty cutting-edge stuff.
Totally.
They're making drum sounds with anything but drums. So I couldn't just... I'd have to listen to something, and I got to a point where I couldn't determine what they had done. I couldn't determine where they got a sound. It certainly hadn't come from a machine, no machines I knew of. And my goal then was to listen to to decipher, to pick out, I'm trying to listen to that snare sound, to that kick sound, to those toms, and figure out what I need to do to make that sound. And oftentimes what I needed to do was combine sounds, was to layer sounds. And now you're talking sound design. Now you're talking what synth guys do. Except I'm the drummer. But I'm doing all that. I'm and the parts weren't hard. A lot of the songs we were doing that were programmed, that were all sequenced, were all for the drums, for bass and guitar and keys, whatever, were basically usually a 4-bar section, and that was looped. And within that 4 bars, you had a little variation or no variation, whatever. But they would almost always be in 4-bar sections. So I only had to figure out what those 4 bars were, line them up all together, figure out if maybe there was a part where they stopped or cut out or whatever. And that I don't try not to leave that up to the engineer. They have enough to do. I try and provide files, stems of everything as it should appear in the song. So I would lay up these samples that I had made. And I lay them up, and I'm very old school. I originally actually did MIDI programming in Pro Tools, which is the last thing you want to do in Pro Tools. But I didn't use Pro Tools to record. I just made the MIDI files, imported the files into my sampler, and let it play the samples. Well, later I learned to actually make full-on wave files, and I did that in Acid. In
I remember
Sony made it for a while. I don't know who makes it now, but which Acid Garage Band, and basically lay it out as it will look in Pro Tools later. And of course, I know the format that the engineer needs, and I know the tempo we're going to do, and if there's any arrangement changes. But I'm able to go in and create on those songs, and most of the parodies we were doing after a certain point were all sequenced. And there's not almost a live drum on any of it. And I would go ahead and get all that together. So my development as a player grew with Al's agenda for doing popular songs, and he just expected us to do it. It's like, you guys can play Eat It, that's great. And he would just throw stuff at us and not understand that we had to work hard to get these sounds.
Figure this out.
Me above anybody.
Of course.
Because it was really hard to figure out what some of these guys were doing. And we didn't really have a keyboard player. We did for a couple of years, and then we kind of went without one for a while, and we just hired guys. And the keyboard players, though, weren't always up on the sounds. Now, Jim West plays the mean keyboard. He's very good at sound design. He's a guitar player, but he can play keyboards, but he knows sounds. So he could do a lot of that stuff. And Steve J also, knows sounds. So I on this last album, on the last album so far in our careers, it was 2014. It was Mandatory Fun. Debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts.
Amazing.
Not comedy. The chart, the 200 album chart. That was a pretty big deal.
That's a pretty big deal.
All of the parodies on there were all done by either me and Jim or me and Steve. And then Al sang. And that was it. That was amazing. We did, just 2 of us did all of the music for all the parodies. And in fact, so no keyboard player on those. And our regular keyboard player, Ruben Valtierra, had been with us since 1991. He didn't end up on that album. There were some live piano parts and key parts on the originals. And the albums are all half originals, half parodies. Al did all of those. He became. There was a point where his right hand could play a piano type keyboard.
Yeah, exactly.
But left hand is buttons. It's a weird thing. So he had to develop his left hand to play chords and stuff like that. And he was able to do that. And he played very well. We did one song that was kind of a Cat Stevens sounding thing, obviously very heavy piano thing. And Al did great on that. He did really, really well on that. And it was very, very cool to have a #1 album. That album, Mandatory Fun, also signaled the end of his contract, finally.
Wow.
Now, Sony, or Volcano, I guess, had bought the Scotti Brothers music catalog.
Okay.
And they actually cut all of the artists. They canceled all their contracts. They had an interesting roster. Actually, I think James Brown was living in America, was on Scotti Brothers. David Cassidy had ended up on Scotti Brothers or something. I think Petula Clark had ended up on Scotti Brothers. They did a number of soundtrack compilations, things like that. Anyway, Volcano basically released all of it and only kept Al. And then eventually we went through the process of working our way up or over across the hall to Sony, and we were eventually on Sony. Well, the contract, even when it was bought, and it's been renewed a few times, but basically this signified the last album of the current contract. And Al had already decided, he says, the internet's in place. Al knows how to promote things. Al is friendly with Apple and can certainly get stuff on iTunes when he wants it. Artists couldn't do that before. You had to be with a label. Well, now artists can do that.
Yeah.
And Al said, we're not going to renew. We don't need a record label. One, albums aren't selling. Two, I can get my stuff all over the internet and on Spotify and wherever I need it without the help of a label. I can do that as an artist that has a proven track record.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened. Left the label. That freed up Al to do whatever he wants. We don't have to do 12 songs in order to have an album. We can record a song and have it out in 3 or 4 or 5 days.
Exactly. Yep.
And where he wants it. You want iTunes to promote it or Apple Music to promote it on a specific day. They will do that. They wouldn't do that 20 years ago. You had to have somebody at a label make a phone call.
Yes.
Well, that's all changed. Of course, now nobody's actually buying that music anyway. That's just become promotion. But you go on the road, people still have to pay to walk through the front door, and that's where the money is. Used to be the albums sold a ton, and the tour helped promote album sales. Now you put free songs out there, and that promotes the tour. And the tour is where you make T-shirts. Merch is a big thing for any artist, really. Definitely. And our fans are very, very loyal. We've got a lot of the same fans we had 40 years ago.
Love that.
And they're bringing their kids now.
That's so cool.
And there's little kids, there's old men, there's everything in between, and it's great. A very wide demo in our audience.
Yeah,
it's very cool, very satisfying, and it keeps growing. It keeps growing. There's no sign of it slowing down.
I love that. I think you touched on a lot of really great things in there. I'd love to dig a little bit deeper on. The one that I really perked my ears up was knowing the sounds, and I think that's something that people, especially going to music school or people that are really diving deep onto an instrument, sometimes miss the idea of learning just sound in general, or being flexible to develop skills like sound design, or going, I'm an acoustic kit player, but let's learn how to do this programming thing, and then going down that rabbit hole. But now it's pretty much mandatory. If you want to work in this business, you have to really understand sound. Would love to just hear more about kind of how you keep up to date, how you keep pushing yourself, and how you're able to pull off records with 2 core band members. I think that's really cool.
It began really with my not wanting to not be the drummer on the records. These are we're doing songs that need sequences, and I'm going to get a machine.
Yep.
Our drum machine's putting drummers out of work. Not me. I went and got a machine.
Exactly.
So that's what began it, and then it evolved. We're always chasing, cutting edge production stuff.
Yes.
And as sound design became a thing, probably in the 90s, I guess, we had to follow suit. There was no either that or he hires somebody else, and I just. I never wanted that to happen. And I suppose deep down, I really wanted to learn as well. It'd be like, this it's probably something I might come in handy someday, if not for someone else. For Al's next record, I need to know this stuff. Yeah. And it was an evolution for me. And it started with a machine, which just meant programming, a limited whatever the sounds were in the machine. And I got different machines. and then later it became buying like CDs, CD-ROMs of samples, of sample libraries that I would put into the sampler and then trigger those via MIDI. So I had and I've still got all those CDs, although I dare say most of those sounds are obsolete. Later, I learned to seek out remixes of records, and I was able to pull samples off of those. Cool. So a lot of the stuff I've got are samples. Some of them from the original recordings where possible. Now, not always possible. And I had to. I'm a good listener. If nothing else, I listen well, and I would I guess I developed that by listening to drum parts and I would write out entire note for note an entire song's worth of every little stupid part was written out. Yep. And if I wasn't sure, I would listen again and again and again and again. And so the parts are one thing. And getting to the sounds, I would just listen to it. And again, not knowing what they didn't become an issue, because it's like, well, what do I hear? What sounds do I hear in there? There's a snare on there, like the snare on the song "Word Crimes," which is a parody of Blurred Lines, which I thought should have been a single. It's just we had recorded it and we didn't. The album didn't come out till much later with a newer lead single on it, and "Word Crimes" became, although there was a video for it, that became a secondary deal. I thought it was a great song, all about grammar and stuff and grammar misuse. Anyway, it's a 4-bar loop in there. There's all sorts of little percussion things. There's a breaking glass sample. There's all this stuff going on, and I'm listening and the snare, and it's always the snare. And I'll tell you another Imagine Dragons story in a second.
Yes, please. Yes.
The snare had a certain sound. It wasn't really just a snare. There wasn't a hand clap on it, so I knew it wasn't that. It was a very specific, tight sound, but it wasn't just a snare, or maybe it wasn't a snare at all. And I'm listening. I thought, if I put a rim click, like a dark, rim click on there, that'll give me that knock that I'm sort of hearing in there. That'll give it that attack that I'm hearing that I know it's not a drum, but I'll bet if I put it over a snare, it's the best of both. And all of a sudden it started to take shape. And I think I might have put and I manipulate the samples as well.
Yes.
So I think I put a single hand clap over it as well.
Yeah.
That had a little bit of snap to it and a little bit of a clop to it. Okay. And between that and whatever snare I used and whatever rim click I used, the knock on there, that was the snare. And I've got all of this stuff written down, exactly the samples I used. Sweet. So I could go back and, I don't remember it, but I wrote it all down. Sure. Anyway, it turned out great. Really, and I love doing that song. We've done that live since the 2015 tour, since that album came out. Yeah. There's one other sound, again, a snare sound that really befuddled me. Okay. And this was, we were doing a parody of the Imagine Dragons Radioactive, and ours was called Inactive, about a guy that just sits in a couch and just plays video games and watches TV. And I couldn't quite figure out the snare in there. I mean, I could hear what it was, but there was something going on, and in the context of the music, I couldn't really do it. And there was none of this AI stuff where you can upload a track and it'll send you back just the drum track, and it's clean enough to hear what's going on. That would have been great to have 30 years ago, or 20 or even 10 years. Yeah. No, I just put something together, and we're getting closer and closer to the recording date, and I put something together that would have been suitable. I wasn't real happy with it. I probably would have passed by Al and everyone else, but I knew it wasn't right. And so I decided, I reached out to the drummer in Imagine Dragons, and I know I know it wasn't played, but that he'd be able to give me some direction on it. Yeah. And I sent him an email and explained the situation, and I said, I never do this. I don't ever, need to ask for help, but I need your help. I can't quite, there's something going on with that snare. And I'm waiting, and 10 days or a couple of weeks go by, and we're going in to record it like in a couple of days. It's like, I'm going to go back one more time and try and work on that sound, but it's just like, and I'd already given up on him. Anyway, I go back to open up the computer, and I've got an email from him, and he sent me the stem of the snares from the song. Awesome. And I'm listening to it. It's like, there's like a sweep, there's a thing that leads up to it, but there's a little gap before the hit, and there's a filter going on, and there's all this stuff going on that's buried in the music, but contributes to it in a way that my snare didn't.
Yes.
And I'm listening to this. I never would have figured that. And I thanked him profusely. Anyway, I lined that all up, and I made the stems of that. And when I sent it in, I mean, we at this point we're just like emailing, or doing a Dropbox or whatever of our parts.
Right.
And I said, to the engineer, I said, do not compress this. Do not EQ it. This is this is the snare from the record that we are doing.
Yes.
And don't just leave it as is. And that made the song. And I was forever grateful to him. And but that's the only time I've had to reach out and ask for some help. Everything else has been really close or almost exact. And I can't say that we always did that very well, because we go back and listen when we first got this concept of copying the original sounds. We go back and listen to Eat It, and it's like, that doesn't really sound that close to Beat It. I mean, it's kind of, sort of, but it's not really. Now, if we did that now, if we were to copy that song now, it would sound exactly like it was intended to sound. And I dare say, and we all got much, much better on each album. And I dare say that last album, we really, really sounded like the original songs that we were parodying. Very, very happy. And when we do the original songs, and a lot of those are in the style and sound and production value of certain bands, certain artists, without being, you can listen to it and go, that sounds kind of like this guy's song, although obviously not legally, but it sounds, Al's not going to get sued, but we know where he got this idea, and it sounds, that sounds like that group playing Al's song with Al singing it. And that's always been the intention. We did a Doors pastiche. Actually, we had a little authenticity on that.
No way.
We had Ray Manzarek play keyboards on that.
Awesome.
But the idea, cool. For me to be the John Densmore, it would be like, well, if Al called in, Al's doing a Doors song, suppose he called in John Densmore to be a really authentic, Doors drummer doing a Doors sound-alike, what would he play? What would I play if I was John Densmore coming in to play this Doors sounding song without playing necessarily specific licks?
Right.
But what would he do? What would be his approach? So I have to get inside his head.
Cool.
I have to do that with a ton of drummers. Whenever, and most of our originals are in the style of some other group or artist, and I have to get inside their heads and try and figure out, what would they do if they were doing this? What should the drums sound like? But Al would give us some direction. He says, well, we're doing a song, and it should have kind of the production value of this song. This is the production we're going after. Cool. So I would know coming in, it wasn't just about parts. Again, there's sounds on that too, even the originals. But that was always, those, in some ways, those were actually harder to work on than just going in and copying a song, because I was like, we never rehearsed the songs we parodied.
Cool.
Awesome. Back in the day that we actually had to perform them, we never rehearsed them because we didn't need to. We knew what we were supposed to play.
Exactly.
I mean, we'd run through it in the studio just to get a sound, just to make sure we could still play together. But we never sat down and rehearsed them. The original songs we had to do because we were actually we were all working on parts.
Yes.
And but and then eventually, on a lot of the parodies, which were just programmed, we never ever played those live until we were going on the road, and if we were going to play it live, that's when we rehearsed. That'd be the first time we'd ever actually play the song.
Yes.
And in a lot of those songs, we have to have some backing track assistance, some percussion, and certain sounds. I mean, there's only so many of us on stage. There's only one guitar player, so we're already at a deficit for bands that had a rhythm guitar and a lead guitar. We're already not, complete. So there's a certain amount of stuff, and we're not faking very much, but we're adding so that we don't sound like a bad bar band, trying to play stuff with a lot of this production. It's got to be in there. We got to have some backing tracks, and sometimes it means putting some strings or horns on something. Sometimes it means putting a second guitar part. Usually it involves putting percussion on there because there's really nobody with any free hands to shake tambourines or play cowbells or do any of that stuff. I mean, I only have so many arms and feet,
Yep.
So that's the kind of stuff that would wind up on our backing tracks. Yet we went ahead and did a couple of tours recently where it was there are no tracks. We usually run video, no video. We usually do costumes, no costumes. Just us sitting there playing. It was sort of unplugged. I mean, we were rocking out, but we're strictly just us, just live. Al got a MIDI accordion, had to learn to play a lot of parts on songs that he'd never played before because we did all of that.
Yeah.
And so now he's like playing stuff in the band that he never had to think about before.
Right.
And we did mostly original songs. There was a short medley at the end, And then we did something also unique, which was a lot of fun and a lot of work.
Okay.
In the encore of these tours, and we went out in 2018, and then again did it in 2022 and 23. We would at the end of we'd come back for an encore, and we would play like a straight cover song. Just like a straight up Glad All Over by the Dave Clark Five, or Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple, or Last Train to Clarksville by the Monkees. I mean, just songs that people kind of would know. Stone songs, Beatles songs, just all sorts of different stuff. And some things that we liked, we did You Can Call Me Al. We did
perfect.
Just good. All sorts. And the 2018 tour, we learned 77 cover songs so that we could play them each one time.
Yes. I love that.
And that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of work. I mean, we didn't learn them all before the tour. We learned a couple before we hit the road so that we would have, one or two in place. And then every day we would rehearse the song we were going to do that night, and then the song we were going to do at the next show.
Perfect.
And so every song got 2 rehearsals.
Nice.
But they only got played one time. Well, when we went out and we did basically the same thing in 2022, we weren't about to learn a whole bunch of new songs. So we pulled out a bunch of the songs that we had done already, added a few new ones, learned, worked up a few new ones, and we did that again. Nice. And I think on our next tour, we're probably going to do the same thing, and I think we're going to just have like a smaller selection of covers that we're going to do. But that was sort of a unique thing, and that's part of what you do when you don't have a new album that you're doing a tour on. Is you change up the tour. Right. And that unplugged thing was one way to change up the tour. Adding a cover song was a way to change up the tour. I should add that every night was a different set. We rotated about 40 songs or something, 40 originals, and would do 16, 17, 18 of them a night. And that was it. And if we did 2 shows in the same city, if we did 2 nights in a row, we would make sure that the next night that there were no repeats.
No repeats. Wow.
But in all of the shows we did 77 shows. They were 77 unique set lists.
Amazing.
Which Al put together, and which we had in advance. I mean, we knew in advance what we were doing. Anyway, we did that again in 2022. We did a tour in 2019. Again, I'm talking about changing things up and keeping them fresh and keeping it exciting. We had done an orchestral tour.
Cool.
Every city we did, we had an orchestra. Now, we carried a conductor because the conductor had to be familiar with the show and and know who's doing what cues and things like that. So we had a conductor. Actually, it was a father and son team. I don't know. That was an odd thing, but we always had one or the other. And they both learned the show pretty quickly, and they would rehearse, that day's orchestra, without us, so that we didn't have to go through a whole show twice in a day. They would rehearse with the tape of our live show from early in the tour, and they would, of course, the orchestra had, music and to work on, and there were some good orchestras. We played with the National Symphony in Wolf Trap and Colorado Symphony in Colorado, a bunch of really good, proper orchestras. And Al got that, and certainly not the first rock band to go out and have an orchestra behind him. I mean, a bunch of bands had done that, but that came about because in 2015 or 2016, I think, we were playing the Hollywood Bowl. We did 2 nights at the Hollywood. We headlined the Hollywood Bowl for 2 nights.
Amazing.
That's pretty good for a guy with an accordion and a suitcase, right?
Right.
So this was during the summer, and the Hollywood Bowl's deal was because they have their house orchestra. If you come in and you play their venue, you're basically putting all those guys out of work. You're putting 70 people out of work. So you have to hire the orchestra.
Cool.
And they'll write arrangements for the show you're going to do. You send them the songs you're going to do and the set order, and they'll make arrangements. They're pros, and they send you sort of a recording. Guy plays sort of keyboard parts, so you get an idea what you're going to hear.
Cool.
When you come in and play it. And we came in on the first of those days and had to go through the whole show. This was the first time we'd ever done that.
Of course.
And went through it, and Al was just blown away.
Yeah.
And he's already now got it in his head. This is great. We could just like show up and orchestra has music and it works.
Right.
This is what a world.
Totally.
They must be like a bunch of pros or something, and they were.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really it was very, very cool.
I never knew that was part of the reason why bands would do those orchestra nights. Is it makes total sense. You're putting them out of work. It's a great way to keep them fed.
Well, I think that, and that would
stuff.
happen, I think, during orchestra season.
Yeah, right.
So which would be summer, spring and summer probably in a lot of places. Although some bands would go out and they would tour with an orchestra because it's a novel thing.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one deal. Or they may target one show and do a special thing, and they'll record it. And then that becomes something that becomes a new album of old material in a fresh way.
For sure.
And that's kind of what happened with us. And the reason we didn't go out and just immediately do that on the very next tour was he already had, we're already doing the 2015 and 16 tour, and he already knows what we're going to do in 2018.
Yes.
He already knows we're doing this unplugged thing. Because he knows we don't have a contract. He knows there's not going to be a new album. So it's like, well, we're going to play stuff we know. We'll change up some songs, obviously. We have 12 albums worth of songs. And 14 albums worth of songs.
Wow.
And some extras.
Yeah.
And he says, well, we'll do that the next tour. So 2018 was the self-indulgent vanity tour, the unplugged tour, or the no frills tour, as we called it. And 2019 would become the orchestral tour called No Strings Attached, as opposed to Oh, no, I'm sorry. Right. It was called Strings Attached.
Strings Attached
instead of No Strings Attached. Sorry.
Yeah. No,
and then 2020 was to be a year off, and then COVID hit. And we were, William Morris is the booking agency, they were starting to put together a tour for 2021, not knowing really what the immediate future held.
Yeah.
And we had big plans for 21. And as that got closer, I think maybe at the end of 2020 or early 21, they said, you know what, it's probably, the things just aren't back yet. You're probably not going to fill places with people who, not going to sit next to each other inside indoors and stuff like that, because we were playing larger theaters and stuff like that mostly. And so they postponed it, and instead we went out in 2022, and we went out for 6 months, actually 27 weeks, with no breaks. No breaks, none, zero, zip. Except when Al caught COVID. He was the first to catch COVID about 3 weeks in, and he's the one guy for which you don't get a sub.
No, exactly.
And it's hard enough for any of us to have subs, because it's a very particular kind of a show that we do.
And of course.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff to learn.
Yeah.
And however, we all had subs lined up just in case, but you can't do that for him. So we actually sat for, I think, 5 days while till he tested positive again. Negative again, sorry.
Yeah.
And then we moved on, and so we missed, I think, 4 dates, which is not bad.
Considering not bad.
Yeah. And again, this is, and everyone's vaccinated and all of that, but it's still a big deal.
Around.
Jim catches COVID next. Now, Jim, the original plan was, unless you're just deathly ill, in which case you get your sub to come in. Unless you're deathly ill, they separate you from the rest of us, from the rest of the band, so we're not exposed.
Yeah, right.
And you play the show from another room, closed off. You eat dinner in another room. You don't travel on. You travel in a separate car. You don't travel with us.
Right.
So that worked for a handful of shows.
Yeah.
And then the tour manager and the crew realized, separating one of the band members from the rest of the band is fine. You keep them away from Al and the guys, but we still have to deal with them. Now we're exposed, and then that becomes an issue when one of us, you don't get subs for us.
Right.
You don't get a sub for the sound man. There's a lot of hands-on, and the monitor guy, and the lighting, a lot of hands-on in that. They can't afford to have, any problems, and there's no way they can get a sub together. Yeah. So the protocol changed. If you test positive at all, no matter how great you feel, you do not play. You do not travel with the band. You stay where you're at until you test negative again. Whatever. And we tested every night, whether we played or not. We tested 7 nights a week, and wherever you test positive for the band, it was after the show. You stay there. You go back to the hotel, you stay there until you test positive, and you get your sub lined up, and hopefully in time for the next show.
Yep.
Well, keyboard player was the next to get COVID, and we were in Regina, Canada.
I've been to Regina. It's a random place. It's beautiful though. It's small. Yeah, it's nice.
and we he had two subs lined up, and
Nice.
one of them had gone off and had taken another gig, which is nobody's sitting around waiting for us to get sick, but
Yeah.
you got to cover your butts. And then the guy who was available there was something up with his passport, and he couldn't get into Canada
Because Canada's so strict with all that.
Well,
So
really
strict.
anywhere. I mean, these days you almost can't get on a plane, without a passport. If you don't have, well, they haven't done the real ID like they have, but if you have a passport, you're okay, which is interesting. And I'm not going to say why on a public place why my passport is interesting, but it's my regular driver's license is more legit than my passport. But I'm going to leave it at that. Okay. Anyway, I mean, the passport has some of my names on it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there was no way to get a sub out, and Al and I sat down. Al says, "What can we do without Ruben?" I said, "Most of the songs would be fine without Ruben." There's a couple of very keyboard centric songs, and we just won't do those. We had enough songs to choose from, and we put together we did the next 4 shows without him. Wow. Which I'm sure irked him.
I'm sure.
We moved. We're already back in the States at this point. He flies out and meets us at the next show, and then we resume that. Well, about 6 weeks later, I get COVID. Now I had 5 guys lined up, including some great players, some experienced touring. They had to be the right temperament. They have to play. And I took a lot of things into consideration. They need to be right-handed so they can sit down at my kit.
Good point.
Without changing their life. Just all sorts of things. They got to be roughly my size. I mean, I really took, so they don't have to make a whole lot of changes. So it's a comfortable transition for them. I had the one anomaly, I guess, would be I had John Hernandez, Vatos from Oingo Boingo, was on my list. And of course, I already talked to everyone. I said, if this happens, and I don't, hopefully not, would you be able to come out on essentially no notice? I'll send you charts, I'll send you recordings, but could you, if you get the call, can you just, are you available to just walk away from your life? Is there someone to take care of the cat? Stuff like that. And I chose people like that for that reason, that could do that.
That could do
Christopher Alice, who was Mike Nesmith's drummer, was on the list. Mario Caleri from Ozo Motley and the Wallflowers was on the list.
Cool.
There are a few people. I asked Bunny Carlos from Cheap Trick.
Awesome.
Because I knew he hadn't been touring with them for quite a while. He wrote back. He kindly wrote back. He says, my touring days are over, but thanks. and it's interesting because Bunny had seen us play a couple of times, and one time after the show, he says, I couldn't do what you do.
No,
Because he knows I'm tied into the video and all that stuff.
Of course.
Or maybe he might have said I wouldn't do what you do.
I wouldn't do it. Yeah.
He might have a better sense of shame than I do. I don't know. With the costumes and all this stuff. Anyway, I had 5 guys lined up. Well, my number one guy was an old, and of course I've heard them all play. I know all the guys.
Yes.
And there was one guy who was kind of always at the top of my list. And I knew wasn't out touring with other bands, and I knew could play the stuff, and I'd known him for like 30 years, and I'd seen him play, and knew he would play the parts and not start to evolve them and try to make it his gig while he was sitting up there.
Yep.
So we're in Ashland, Kentucky, playing a theater, and it's funny that afternoon, that day, I'm not feeling. I sort of felt okay. But my nose was just running all day, like I had an allergy, and I don't really have allergies. And it was just a very interesting. I knew something just wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I called him that day. I said, are you still hanging around? Because I don't know for sure, but just in case, there's something's up, and I don't know what. And if it's COVID, can you come out and tomorrow?
Yeah.
He says, yeah. I hope you're okay, but let me know.
Yeah.
So we did the show. Tested after the show, and I tested positive twice, and so it's like, okay, you gotta, can your guy come out? And I called him. It was like 10:30 at night, but we're in the same time zone at that time, and I called him. I said, "Can you come out? Like, there's a show tomorrow. Can you come out?" And he'd been working on the parts. I know he'd been working on the parts.
Yeah.
And he says, "Yeah, And I basically put him onto the tour manager who got him a plane ticket. He was on so 10:30 at night. He was on a plane at 6 a.m.
Awesome.
And flew out and did the show. They didn't have to make any changes. They didn't have to drop any songs or anything for him.
Yeah.
And he did the next 4 shows and did a great job. And I know he did because I've got recordings of those shows.
Yes, right.
He did great. He even sings, which cool. I don't do. And or I try not to. Al tries not to make me sing. And I think he probably sang some stuff. Cool. Anyway, he did great. So but in the meantime, I'm in Ashland, Kentucky, in a hotel room,
Right.
just kind of waiting. The next day, the tour manager hooks me up with a rock doc, rock and roll doctor who was able to get me a prescription for Paxlovid, which there was a drugstore not too far away, and I went out and took a walk down there and got it there and started taking that, the next day, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And basically, I stayed in the hotel the whole time. Anyway, I met up with them in St. Louis. I got to a day where it was like, you know what, I'm almost, I'm going to be negative tomorrow,
Yeah.
and they said, okay, fly out, we'll get you a flight, fly out, let us know how you test that morning. And if you're completely negative, you do the show that night in St. Louis, we'll send Nick home.
Nice.
And so, I was there, tested completely negative, let them know. So they went ahead and booked Nick on a flight. But in the meantime, I got to sit down with him for about an hour at the hotel and just sort of catch up with him. He had moved to Nashville from L.A. years ago, and I hadn't really spent much time with him in a while. So we got to just sit and chat and catch up a little bit. I thanked him profusely for, working on the parts. So the guys, Al was really, really appreciative that I had done my homework and had somebody, like they didn't miss any time at all. I mean, they just went on to the next show, which, would not have happened with the other guys. And he really thought I had done a great job. I said, I picked the right guy who did a great job. He did his homework. I made the choice, but he's the one that pulled it off. So in the meantime, I talked to him recently. I said, again, I don't know what the protocols are going to be next time, but just for any reason, if I break my arm or fall out of a plane or something, would you be willing to come back out and sit in or resume the tour? If that happens. He says, oh, absolutely. I would love to do that. So I've got one guy lined up next time, and I'll line up, one or two more just in case. But that's not something we've ever had to do before.
No,
that's not something we've thought of. And in the end, everyone on the band bus, in the end, had caught COVID at some point.
Wow.
With Steve J, it happened after the tour. He caught it later, but and nobody on the crew bus did, which is very, very interesting because they interacted with local crew people 5 times a week, and we only interacted with ourselves and the crew. But somehow, everyone in the band bus,
Random.
had, and nobody got really sick. Actually, Steve got sick, but nobody got really, really sick. So that's thanks to the vaccines, I'm sure, that helped. When we went back out, we wrapped up at Carnegie Hall actually at the end of October in 2022. Pretty cool gig. We played the Kennedy Center that year. Right. Did some really prestigious places. It was very cool. And again, this was the Unplugged tour. This was not with the orchestra. With the orchestra, we played some very cool venues. For that, we had to play big stages.
Yeah, exactly.
We played Red Rocks outside of Denver. Sold out Red Rocks.
Amazing.
Pretty cool.
That's pretty dang cool.
So we went back out and we did the European and Australia tour in February and March of 23. And then we also made up for the 4 dates that Al missed. We made, which were sort of in the upper Midwest, kind of like Michigan, I think one in Illinois, maybe one in Indiana, something like that. We did those, and we added a date as well while we were at it. So we did 5 dates in the States at the beginning of February of that year, and then went on to, I think we started in Dublin, Ireland, was our beginning of almost 4 weeks in Europe, which was great. Played a bunch of places we never played there before. Played the London Palladium while we were there.
Awesome.
Just very cool. Very fun tour, and had some days off in some cool places. I think had a day off in Dusseldorf, which actually was pretty cool.
Awesome.
It was neat. Played Vienna for the first time. Played in Germany for the first time. Berlin, Dusseldorf, Hamburg. Hamburg was great. Enjoyed Hamburg a lot. Cool. And then went to Australia. And anyway, so for this, we were out for almost 8 weeks, and on that tour was a 180 from the one before. There were really no COVID protocols. In other words, it's not, stay out of restaurants and wear a mask when you're near anybody and stuff like that. It was like, do what you want to do, but we're not going to enforce any protocols. I brought tests along just to see where I was at the whole time. At any rate, and I always wear masks on planes. Still do.
Yep.
And but I brought some tests along, and I just tested throughout the entire tour. I was like, no problem. Whatever we were doing it right.
Yeah,
Nobody got sick. We did.
Awesome.
We did fine. Not sure how that's going to play out on future tours.
For sure.
I think I'm always going to wear a mask on a plane from now on.
No, I get it.
But
it can be pretty gross.
But I'm going to stay vaxxed up and stay current with all of that stuff and do my best to not catch COVID again. And again, I didn't have a tough time with it. I just would rather have not had it.
Yes, of course.
I would rather have done those shows.
Yeah, of course.
And but I did get sick pay. I did get paid for that week. So it's not like it cost me anything.
Right.
In fact, it cost Al because he had to pay. He had to fly the other guy back and forth. He had to fly me because I was going to be on the bus otherwise. It cost him, He paid a fair bit out of his pocket. He had to sing a few songs to afford that.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, that was our COVID experience.
But that's a really great, just kind of general lesson for what life on the road looks like. Having contingencies, maintaining your health, minimizing risk. And then also, trying to build a community, because it's always it's a little dangerous to call in somebody to sub, because like you're saying, if they have the wrong personality, they might try to sow division or take the gig or devolve parts in a certain those people exist.
I mean, the personality issue was more a case of I just wanted them to be able to get along with the guys.
Perfect.
And we're all pretty easygoing. I mean, there's not any real jerks in the organization. Because everyone's together like 24/7. You can't have people that are ruffling feathers.
And that's why you had longevity. That's why you've been working together for so long.
So we've had longevity in the band. This has been the same band since the first album, since 1982.
That's beautiful.
With the exception of sort of keyboard players coming and going, so we don't really count them. We count this guy that's been with us coming up on 33 years. He's our touring keyboardist.
Cool.
But the core band has been the same this whole time. And there's only one other band that's been together with the same guys and still working longer than us, and that's U2.
No way. That's a great...
And I think their last album was a number one album also. So, although they're still, I think they're still making albums. That's the only difference between them and us. But as far as still out there working, and the same guys from day one,
cool.
It's us and them.
Yeah, I love that.
So not bad, not bad.
On that note, Bermuda, I want to ask you one final question. So this is one of my favorite little parts of the episode. So the show is called Love Music More, and we call the segment Love Music Why. And really, this is just an opportunity to talk about why do you love music after all these years? Why do you wake up excited to work, to play, to collaborate? What is it about music that keeps you going, keeps you excited? Why do you love it?
I guess I just love music. I mean, that's it. I mean, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to hear music. It makes me feel good to play music. I mean, that's why I can play. And I'm in a number of bands here in LA. I always have been. And, of course, when I'm on the road, they defer to Al. They have to, and they all go get subs. And I come back to town, and I come back into these bands. So I've yet to be replaced in any of these bands. And some of them I've been with for many, many years. There's one guy I've been playing with since 1981. Still work with him. I enjoy playing. I just enjoy playing drums. And I am happy. I'm fine playing in front of 5,000 people or 50 people, or 5 people. Well, not 5, 50. No, I mean, it doesn't matter. I can play a bar or I can play Red Rocks, and it's really, it's kind of behind the kit. It's the same to me. I mean, I enjoy it the same, and that's just because I enjoy playing drums, and I play all sorts of different music that I might not listen to otherwise, and I enjoy it because I'm playing drums, and I enjoy it. I think, and that's why I love music.
I love that. No, I think that's special. Just to.
It makes me feel good.
It makes you feel good. And it makes other people feel good to experience it, and the community that you're in, to play it with other people. I mean, all that's really powerful. And I love the perspective of, it's all music, be it in Red Rocks or otherwise. It's all music, and keeping that joy and keeping that perspective, which can be really difficult, I think, especially from an artist's perspective.
It's one last thing about it's all music. A lot of people, a lot of musicians, a lot of artists, who play a real instrument, are just down on all of this sequenced programmed stuff, and a lot of the rap and hip hop and stuff. And I have a different perspective on it because I've listened to a lot of this stuff because we've gone in and parodied a lot of this stuff. Right, Now that's, Al may make up funny words, but I mean, my business is serious, and I have to go in and I have to dissect and I have to listen and I have to study, and I know what goes into these productions. I know very, very well what it takes to do that. It's not somebody just slapping together a bunch of sounds. There's a lot of work that goes into it. Maybe not as much work as I put in trying to figure out what they did, but there's a lot that goes into it. So I have a real appreciation for a lot of stuff. The Super Bowl, the Usher, and all of that stuff. I have a real appreciation for what it takes to make those songs, for what it takes to put on a production like that. It's a show. It's entertainment. I mean, that's what the Super Bowl has become, and that's okay. It's just, you got to be at that level, and that's what these Super Bowl shows are. That's what these halftime shows are. They're at another level. And I appreciate what they do to do that. And so I can watch it and I can enjoy it. And it may or may not be music I listen to, but I enjoy it and I listen to it. Maybe I'm sitting there dissecting it. I don't know what it is, but I'm in it and I'm engrossed in it. And I know what it takes to do that stuff. And it's not just throwaway, slap together, simple stuff. And a lot of these musicians who create serious stuff don't understand that someone else pushing buttons and manipulating files is also creating. And it's not as easy as they think, and it's and I know that very, very well. So I have an appreciation for both sides. Do I have a preference? No, because I like playing drums or making drum sounds. Whatever it takes to make drum sounds, I like doing that. And so I'm good with either way.
That's great perspective. Well, thank you so much, Bermuda. Really appreciated the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Have a great one.